The next set of panelists will reveal more of the PBF model and how it's addressed community needs through its multiple partners. It will touch on how the marriage of policy and legislation, grants and loans have unlocked the power of partnership. I'll have the opportunity to be able to welcome Aysha Pamukcu, Director of PDF Policy Fund, to moderate. Yeah. And she's got great resume of incredible things, and what I would also highlight here is that the founder of Movement Praxis, and which is an equity-centered policy and philanthropic consulting practice, and also serves on the board of Asian Pacific Environmental Network and California Community Builders, as well as the founding team of the Just Transition Lawyering Institute. Also serves on local communities on the South San Francisco Planning Commission and San Mateo County Commission on the status of women. So please join me in giving a big welcome.
Thank you so much, Michael. And wow, I know somebody has to go after that first panel. And I really couldn't think of some better folks to do it. We are joined by an amazing powerhouse of folks here, and it's my pleasure to introduce them. Next to me, we have Sam Licardo, who led the Bay Area's largest city as San Jose mayor for 2 terms. He led efforts to engage unhoused residents in innovative work programs, convert motels into ELI housing 4 years before Governor Newsom made it into a statewide model, and passed the 2020 Measure E, which provides roughly $70 million annually for affordable housing and homelessness prevention in San Jose. Prior to becoming mayor, Licardo served as council member and led an effort to pass a citywide inclusionary housing measure that was opposed by industry all the way to the Supreme Court and protected hundreds of cities' inclusionary programs from subsequent legal challenge. Now he's running for Congress as California's 16th district to push Congress to address homelessness and the nation's housing crisis with federal resources and better policy. Thanks for joining us, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you.
And next up, we have Nikki Beasley, Executive Director of the Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services, Inc., who clearly needs no introduction. He joined the organization in 2016 after a 25-year career in banking and financial services, and has a strong affinity for community service and housing. Because of her leadership, RNHS has doubled its property management rental portfolio for low to moderate income families, established the organization's Changing the Narrative Homeownership Initiative, and started the Lender Ready program in 2017, assisting over 250 first-time homebuyers in secure ownership, in addition to a number of other innovative programs and projects, including informing the creation of the Emerging Developers Program in 2021. Thank you, Nikki. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, I'm so pleased to introduce Cindy Wu, a recognized leader in community development who works to advance equity through collaboration. As Senior Executive Director, she's led LISC Bay Area office since 2020, which you will all remember was quite an eventful year. And prior, Cindy worked at the Chinatown Community Development Center as Deputy Director, where she oversaw affordable housing development, property management, and internal operations through a period of growth. She's a pragmatic problem solver and has a deep commitment to community-centered decision-making. So thank you all so much for joining us. I'm really pleased to get into this conversation. The first panel teed us up so fabulously, and now we're going to get into some of what makes the Partnership for the Bay's Future tick, from the very people who are quite close to the work and have been close partners and allies throughout these past 5 years. So I have the pleasure of getting to introduce a little bit of what we've been working on at the Partnership for the Bay's Future. I'm going to share a little bit of our accomplishments from the policy fund side of things, where I lead the work, and then I'll be turning it over to Cindy to share a few accomplishments from the family of loan funds, and then we'll get into the good stuff, which is the discussion. Next slide, please. So with the Partnership for the Bay's Future, there's 2 things that I really want to emphasize that are part of, if you will, the secret sauce for how we do things. And the first piece is really about the partnership. What we do is we create a big tent coalition across sectors. Folks have heard about all the different folks that we bring to the table, philanthropy, government, nonprofit, community, our corporate friends as well. And it's important that everyone come to the table because we all have a stake in the housing crisis. I like to think that in many ways, all roads lead to housing. It's an issue that anyone who cares about their own priorities will come at housing, whether it's environmental justice and climate adaptation, racial justice and persistent housing segregation. All roads lead to housing. And we invest big, and we aren't afraid of taking chances. We heard a lot about how the Policy Fund and the Family of Loan Funds and the different folks that we convene help create an environment where we can take chances. We can bet big. We can take risks. And we stay grounded in our values: racial justice, economic inclusion, and community-driven solutions. Next slide, please. And I think one of the most important things about PBF is that we don't just bet big with our dollars, we really bet big on people. We focus on leadership development, building the field, relationships, the durable network of advocates and folks whose hearts have led them into this work. And we resource them with technical assistance and convenings and resources and grants. Next slide. And so we'll talk a little bit about the Policy Fund and some of what it's achieved, and then I'll turn it over to Cindy. Next slide, please. So there's 3 components to the Policy Fund, and part of why I want to show this to folks is it's not just about what we do and the results that we've achieved, but how we do it. And I think that's what really makes the Partnership for the Bay's Future so innovative. And the key to the Policy Fund's approach is really a 3-part model. And the first is placing a PBF fellow within local government. And that's really the capacity building, the people power push that our local government partners need to focus on this work and take it to the next level. We also support our community partners with 2 years of grant funding and technical assistance support to partner closely with local governments, with the fellows who you've heard so much about being kind of the hub or the connective tissue between the two. And then we bring everyone together through our convening power to strengthen successes, provide technical assistance, and provide the safe and brave spaces where folks can have the online and offline conversations they need to strengthen their relationships and move policy agendas through. Next slide, please. And what is so remarkable about this is not just what it achieves. 12 policies passed and counting, 40 policies proposed, but it also transforms the policy process itself. And this is the piece that I can't emphasize enough. We see that trust is deepened between nonprofit advocates and community leaders and our folks who work in local government, not just our elected leaders, but also government staff. We also see that the policy solutions that folks come up with are co-created. It's really a team process between those at the grassroots level and those who are working within local government. And it's that inside-outside process that is really the heart of what we do at the Partnership for the Bay's Future. We know that it's going to take people from all different vantage points, different perspectives, and different levels of technical and lived expertise to actually move the needle where we want to go. So we're very proud of, again, not just what we do, but how we do it. And you'll see here that some of our partners, next slide, please, are the ones whose voices that we want to bring in front of you today. This is just a snapshot of some of the different policies and achievements we've passed. Each of them has their own story, their own conversation, as Fred said, like their own messiness, and that's really what we don't shy away from. And so what we do is something really impressive because through all of these efforts, we've got thousands of residents engaged in some of the most marginalized and disinvested communities across the Bay Area. We've got 73,000 tenants protected, 15 local governments participating, over 40 nonprofit organizations as our grantees alone. And so as you can see, we take really seriously the idea that this is a big tent movement and moment. So with that, I will wrap up a little bit of the snapshot of what we've been doing over at the Policy Fund and turn it over to my colleague Cindy to give a snapshot of what's happening at the Family of Loan Funds.
Thanks, Aysha. Next slide, please. It's so good to be in this room with friends. Shout out to the LISC Bay Area crew over here. So many of you have been our partners in this work. So next slide, please. As has been said, we are thrilled to tell you $423 million worth of closed loans. It's just really deep investment in the Bay Area. Thank you to our partners at Corporation for Supportive Housing and Capital Impact Partners. The three of us were the originators in the fund, and LISC was also the fund manager for the funds. You'll see here that the funds have three parts. They are a little bit of a mouthful, but let's try. The Bay's Future Fund Main Fund, the Bay's Future Fund Preservation Sidecar, and the Community Housing Fund. So the Bay's Future Fund was really about both innovation and inclusion. We supported modular. We supported new construction that was affordable by design. We supported small-scale preservation, 40 units and under. We supported large-scale preservation through the sidecar, 200 units. So really, everything that we were seeing, all the different solutions we were seeing in the affordable housing market. The Community Housing Fund was really narrow on serving those of our most vulnerable neighbors, actually some neighbors that were unhoused. And so it focused on housing for people who were under 30% of area median income, so extremely low income folks, and mostly it was supportive housing. And so we wanted this big picture of the three funds to make sure we were being hitting all parts of the market and being inclusive. We supported borrowers who were moving into multifamily for the first time, one sitting to the right of me. We supported folks that were thinking about their first development. We thought about even middle-income housing and workforce housing. We supported borrowers who had owned land because they were faith-based landowners but wanted to build affordable housing on their land. I see, Carla. And so just really excited to be able to do and support so many different solutions. Next slide, please. So one key to bringing all the different investors into the Bay's Future Fund in particular was making sure that we were speaking the language of banks and making sure we were speaking the language of PRIs at foundations. And then it was really important to speak to our own equity outcomes. And we took these as seriously as we took any kind of legal document that we had with any partner. We held ourselves accountable and we worked transparently on these goals. So you'll see here we talked about who we were housing in terms of income. 91% at 80% of AMI and below. I know these are wonky planner acronyms, but half of the funds were supporting people at 50% of AMI and below. So really, really building housing for folks who need it. Compared to a historical number for LISC at least, we surpassed it. We did over 50% of the borrowers identified as people of color. For who, in terms of race identity, lived in the units, for preservation projects, obviously someone is living in the unit when it's acquired. And so we were able to get self-reported data that 95% of people identified as people of color who were in preservation projects. I think this has big ramifications for future strategy. And for new construction, we used a methodology with census data to estimate that 65% of people will be identified as people of color. And then geographically, Partnership for the Bay's Future was about the region, and so we did work in all 5 regions that are in the partnership. But you'll see here that we did the most deals in Alameda and then 30% in Santa Clara, and that's really because of partnership with bonds that voters voted on in those counties. So that has ramifications for the future with the bond opportunity in front of us this November. And I'll close by giving a little advertisement, which is that we can continue to originate loans until December of 2025. So if any developers are in the audience, or you know any developers that need debt for their affordable housing, please call us.
Thank you, Cindy. And I would be remiss if I didn't do a little advertisement for the other side of the shop as well.
We're all one shop.
And let you all know that something that is in the works that we're very proud of is a PBF playbook, which is essentially a how to make a PBF in your community, which is something that we've heard a lot of interest in because, as you can see, it's a complex and ambitious undertaking, and we're trying to sort of bottle that and take that to other communities, so keep an eye out for that, as well as our upcoming Cohort 3 for our grant program. So folks, yes. So folks who are working in local government, working hand in hand with community, come talk to us because that is all underway. So let's get into the conversation. We talked about starting this off with a bit of a personal story. So I'd love to hear from folks, how did you get into this work being a housing champion? And how did you come to PBF specifically? And I'm happy to sort of break the ice a little bit on that and just, share for me, like with so many of us, I think virtually everyone that I've talked to in this work, it's very personal. I'm the child of immigrants from 2 different countries, born and raised in the Bay Area, still proudly rocking that 408 area code and it's not going anywhere. That's right. I have experienced housing insecurity as a kid and have really come to appreciate the opportunities and the risk in terms of calling the Bay Area home and trying to put down roots here. And so as I went through my career, starting out as a civil rights lawyer, then finding my way into public health, I found my way to housing because all of the issues that I cared about and all of the lived experiences that had brought me to my professional path pointed me in the direction of housing. And so that is how kind of my personal story really led me to this particular place. And I'd love to hear from you all, where are the intersections between your lived experience and your professional life that has brought you here to this work? Sam, maybe we can start with you.
Well, thank you. And it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being in a room with so many partners who have worked together so incredibly well, as you just saw from Cindy's presentation. I came to this as an elected official. I grew up in a position of privilege, obviously, as a white male in the suburbs, but learned very clearly from my mom, who had a very difficult experience growing up through poverty, what it was to deal with housing insecurity at a time when it wasn't quite in custom as it is today. And for her, it was she was the daughter of an Irish immigrant and a Mexican-American father who struggled enormously. And her account would be repeated to me throughout my childhood and kind of informed a bit about what I thought the role of public policy was in terms of addressing the critical need that became so apparent to all of us as we grew up here in the valleys or in the Bay Area, as many of us did. When John Kennedy was asked how'd you become a war hero, his response to a child was, "Well, they sank my boat." I think every major city mayor in this country would be asked, how'd you get involved in housing? And it would be a similar account. Everything you try to accomplish in a city around reducing poverty or creating jobs or improving educational outcomes, whatever it might be, always inevitably has a housing component. And too often it becomes an obstacle to whatever goal you're really trying to accomplish because people simply can't afford to live there as we're experiencing housing crisis in all of our regions. Similarly for me as well, I kind of came into this with some experience serving as a volunteer in different affordable housing boards and so forth, but really only understanding the depth of it as I got into public service more formally. And what really brought me to the PBF was experience that I had as mayor, joining the CASA process and the CASA Compact, which I know Fred Blackwell was just with us, led the effort with several others. And I had previously always been focusing as mayor on what can we do within our toolbox to address this challenge in San Jose, passing measures, changing policies, and so forth, and usually only just griping about whatever other cities are or not doing in this regional challenge. And it really wasn't only when I got to the CASA process that I really started to appreciate, hey, there's an opportunity for us to work together regionally. This is a different way to address this problem, and really applaud the many people in this room who put their shoulders to the wheel to make that regional process happen, because it doesn't happen in a lot of other places in this country, particularly major foundations, as we saw, with SFF, LISC, and Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Packard, and so many folks working together. This is really tremendous to see major institutions working together in this way. And obviously, as a mayor, I was happy to be a beneficiary of that collaboration.
Thank you. Nikki.
So as you heard in my bio, I retired from banking in 2014. So I was, looking for something
You're the
new.
least retired person I know.
Failure.
Don't let the smooth taste fool you. So I was looking for something new. A colleague of mine said, hey, a board members come to me and said, hey, we have this little nonprofit. We're looking to get it back on its feet. And, do you know anyone? She says, Nikki, your name just kept coming up, so I had to, ask you about it. I said, well, I'm open. I'm interested. Went through the process and came on board May of 2016. So our organization has been around since 1981 and was really established by local residents. So I rolled up my sleeves and, wanted to do the good work and, leaned into what I knew, banking being the anchor of what I knew. So we revamped our HUD counseling work, and then quickly realized we were doing a great job getting people qualified for housing, but they couldn't afford to buy anything. And so I was new, bright, and bushy-tailed. Well, let's go build it. So we ended up purchasing land in West Oakland, trying to solve for the problem of ownership that would be affordable. And then not quickly learned, but over a number of years learned that the opportunity to build home ownership from the ground up is nearly impossible, and at this point, not possible. So through that, I became an emerging developer. So as you see the pathway of our work, I've always been trying to solve the problems that have come up that we have heard or faced from community. So that's how I think I became a champion, saw a problem, tried to solve it, and all of our programs and all of the work we've done has been driven in that direction, and it's all kind of holistic to solve for all of the things that we're always so challenged to deal with on a daily basis. My personal story is I'm born and raised in San Francisco. When I left in 2000, it wasn't about, affordability. It was about I wanted a front yard, backyard. I was one of the first migrants that moved to the Valley, moved to Stockton. A lot of my life was maintained there. And then when I started coming back to the Bay Area, I was like, there's something different. Don't know quite what it is. And then started to learn about gentrification. But what's really interesting about my story is me being a Black woman. When my grandparents would talk about how they got to California, I didn't realize it was about the great migration from the South, because our family didn't talk about those things like that. But it really has been that I've been ingrained in this work that now I'm starting to connect the dots. Oh, so when my grandfather said he couldn't buy the house, that he had to have his white friend do it, I'm like, oh, that's what that was. So it really has been a transformative opportunity for me to learn a little bit more about my history, because it wasn't shared with me as I was growing up, but also being very passionate about me taking the fiduciary responsibility, that's my banking background, to do what's right on behalf of the people that we have been committed to serve.
Yeah.
I am also the daughter of immigrants, first eldest daughter, so, all the pressures are on you.
Make a club.
My first job here in San Francisco was at Glide, so my work history is all within walking distance of where we are right now. And at the time, Glide had built their first affordable housing building, the Cecil Williams Glide Community House. And it was where I learned about supportive services, that clinical supportive services are really important, but also the support of relationships is really important, and being part of a community. We were a staff of 5. There were 70 residents, and they taught me a lot. And then I moved on to my next education. I worked for 13 years at Chinatown Community Development Center. Really, everything I learned. I know, big. The organizers I worked alongside, they schooled me way more than anything I learned in planning school. The residents, the tenant leaders of public housing, the tenant leaders who were at risk of displacement. And Chinatown's history is that Chinese people were excluded from living anywhere else, so only could live in Chinatown. And then as the neighborhoods around became very wealthy, and as a really rich cultural fabric was built in Chinatown, then the displacement pressures came, right? And so now everyone's fighting to stay. And so those were really, really formative years of my life. And so coming to LISC, really, I came to LISC for this opportunity to work on the Partnership for the Bay's Future and to think about access to capital for communities to realize their own dreams. And that was just so enticing, because money is power. And so who has access to the money and then who owns the real estate is who is in charge of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Thank you. Also, I love hearing what makes folks kind of cheer and get excited, because it tells me that there's some like major housing nerds in the audience. So I'm feeling very comfortable and at home. But I think as we're hearing from everyone's stories, and thank you for sharing, it's very moving and inspiring to hear. Housing is intensely personal, even as it's intensely political. And it's also very much grounded in a long-standing history, right? Where we are today did not happen overnight, and it did not happen by accident. And so part of why we push for solutions in the way that we do is because we really believe that any solutions to the housing crisis has to be grounded in people's lived experience, has to be grounded in community and our shared values of racial justice and economic inclusion. And so I'd love to put it to you all to hear about, how do you center community? How do you center equity in the work that you do?
I will start by saying, being new to housing, I didn't know a lot. I just knew that, I'd been given a job and I was finding my way. But what I found often, I was one of the few, if only, voices that represented the communities that we were trying to solve for. So I saw the people we were solving for. It could be my grandparents, it could be my mother, it could be my cousin, it could be my sister and my brother. So it really became important for me to lift those things up, and not that there was any ill intent, but people just didn't have the association. So my voice started to become that catalyst of, it's not about units, it's about the people. There's a reason why they may need larger closet space, because they're, coming in with, multiple children, and no, they're not going to ride a bike with the 3 kids to the grocery store. They're going to need a place to park. And no, they're not going to be able just to be reliant on transportation because it's expensive. So I think that's what kind of brought my voice into the conversation. And I didn't answer the part about how I got to PBF, but it was about relationship, and I'm circling back because I didn't know a lot, but I was humble enough to say I didn't know. And just in my hero, Netflix, watch Shirley Chisholm, I was bringing my chair to the tables that I wasn't being invited to. And being okay with having a different perspective and kind of leaning on the naivete because I didn't know. So that really was a high value of, how I could show up. And then people, being confident enough in what I was attempting to do to say, you know what, Nikki, let me take you to the side. Let me help you out. And giving me the terms and the direction so that we could fulfill some of the objectives that we were attempting to accomplish.
And let me also say, too, Nikki, you wear a lot of different hats because your organization is both a grantee and you have availed yourself of the Family of Loan Funds. So also want to appreciate the perspective you bring.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll build on that because I think, like I showed the equity dashboard, that's one way to look at equity on the back end after you've closed loans. Another way to think about equity in the course of managing a fund is who do you spend time with? Are you spending time with people that don't already speak all the lingo? In some ways, actually, I didn't speak all the lingo coming into the job. I came from a CDC, but I never once was a project manager, didn't know what a pro forma was. Figured it out really quickly by asking friends the same way maybe you did, right? And so, but you knew what you were fighting for, you knew what you were looking for housing and security for folks. And so that brings me to want to talk about listening to the self-determination of communities, like listening really hard for what are folks saying that they need. And equity is really trying to translate these really complicated systems to meet these needs. And I think that that's a way we can think about it. And then one more thing I want to say about equity, maybe for the future of where we're going, is that this is an incredible moment of 5 years of celebration, the work of the Partnership for the Bay's Future, the work of everyone working on the affordable housing bond, everyone that worked to make BAFA a reality, all the different housing initiatives in our Bay Area. And like now is really not the time to retreat at all, right? We have to keep going and we have to keep using a racial and economic equity lens. And there's so much backlash right now. There's so many lawsuits, the Supreme Court ruling against affirmative action, but I think that the Bay Area can keep showing the way of how we do this work.
Great.
I came into the conversation around centering community with my own blind spots and maybe learned the hard way. I can remember in particular one epiphany I had, and we had a meeting in a school with predominantly Spanish-speaking moms, and we're talking about an affordable housing project we're bringing to a neighborhood in Washington, Guadalupe. And of course, I expected everybody to love me because here we're bringing affordable housing in their community. Aren't I great? And instead, what I heard was a fear of displacement from this affordable project. And there was a lot of concern because some women in the room said, hey, we don't have legal status. Does that mean we're never going to be eligible to live here? Is this going to make everything more expensive? I mean, I started really recognizing in that moment, we're not, at least I'm not listening enough. And, I appreciate what the approach that PBF has brought, which is really around co-designing with the community, starting with the community to help to identify solutions. And for me, what that meant, and I think our team over at the housing department in San Jose got this very clearly, was a real focus on displacement and what we needed to do to address that. And as we speak this week, a big debate was held over on the city council around tenant preference and local tenant preference, and I think that's a long overdue conversation. I know we've had lots of legal challenges at the federal and state level with all of that stuff, but it seems to me so critical because we need communities to really embrace what we're trying to do to expand affordable housing supply, and we need them to know that they're a part of this, and it's got to start with them in some way, and they need to embrace it before we can make any forward progress. So, I'd like to think that an awful lot of leadership throughout the Bay Area is kind of coming around to this view where a lot of folks have been, I'm sure, in this room for many years, and that is starting with the community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And, I'm going to come back to you, Sam, and Nikki for this next question because, you both do have such special perspectives to, the PBF friends and family. Sam, of course, you were the mayor of San Jose for 2 terms, also a partner community of ours, along with nonprofit Somos Mayfair. And then Nikki, you are working closely with our grantee governments as one of our grantees. And so would love to hear from you both around what an inside-outside strategy looks like to you and what is the significance of it. And for our audience, I'm sure inside-outside is something that you hear a lot from us at PBF, but very specifically what we're talking about is a change-making approach and strategy that unites the folks who are in government and tasked with doing work in a very specific and structured way with the folks who are outside of government in community body who are close to the problem, close to the grassroots, and can really provide that intel and that lived experience and co-create the policies with folks in local government. And so would love to hear from you two about your perspective. What does inside outside look like to you? And what's the significance of that approach?
Okay. I would say, I use the term a lot with my team, will and skill. Will, we can't fix that. Skill, we can train, we can, build you up. So I take that into this experience. When you have partners that have will to figure it out, then great things can happen. And if there is no will, it makes it very challenging. So I've seen the success is when there is a will, where there's the ability to try to figure out how to say yes before you say no. In these partnerships where when fellows come into the space, the municipality or public entity is able to really leverage that fellow as a capacity build. To be able to extend work that they just haven't gotten around to. And I think it's a perfect example with the work that's been done under this cohort with the North Richmond project. It's close to home because that's where our organization sits, the Los Deltas project. And the reason it's so near and dear, this was one of the first projects that I stumbled upon in 2016 when I came into the organization, and it was really only until the fellowship came that it gave the housing authority the capacity and the ability to move it forward, which we were the benefactors of being able to now acquire some of those properties, which was a long time vision. But I think it's a great example that when you have the public entity that says, hey, this is really good work, either we don't have the time or the capacity, but if you give us this resource, we could figure it out. So I think that's really where the benefit lies. I think it's the power of and in both, where both sides are, I think was said a couple of times, being heard, because being a nonprofit entity, we have different languages. Public sector has different languages, but you got to come together and figure out what language are we going to speak to get the work done. So that's where I've really seen the value when it works well through these partnerships.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I saw a little bit about how it worked before. We were really incorporating much of that strategy in partnership with the teams at PBF. In East San Jose, where we had for some time historically had created this form-based zoning and as a way to try to spur redevelopment of part of East San Jose. It was really in response to, at the time, a community saying, nobody's investing here, we don't have jobs here, we want to see development accelerate. Fast forward 10 years into a much deeper housing crisis, and suddenly it became the enemy policy because it was a spur to redevelopment that was potentially displacing, which we knew was actually displacing people, although it wasn't really redevelopment that was doing it. It was the fact that we didn't have enough housing at all, because there actually wasn't any redevelopment happening. But they saw this policy as essentially something that's being weaponized by City Hall against people. So it became really apparent we needed to change that dynamic where people in East San Jose actually viewed whatever the city was trying to do around redevelopment, particularly around affordable housing, is something that will be enhancing to the existing community. And displacement policy work really started through the fellow program, as I recall. And I'm not sure if Aysen's here, but Aysen Ndiaye, who is one of the, there's Aysen. Yes. Who did a tremendous job. I know had background in policy and community organizing, which was very, very helpful. And, like all cities, we're totally understaffed and overworked. And I guess HCD isn't kind to any of our cities in terms of, when I hear, in terms of additional demands and staff work. And so we really needed capacity. We need somebody who could both bring new perspectives, understand the community, or help us understand the community better, but also drive policy change in ways that simply city staff can't, because they're trying to keep the wheels on in what was, the time I was there, the most understaffed city hall of any big city in the country, which I think every mayor says probably, but in our case it was true. So that was really helpful, just having fellows who come in who can drive that kind of different thinking while everybody in the city staff is doing all they can simply to keep the ship moving.
Absolutely. And I want to appreciate and uplift the point that I'm really hearing also around capacity building, which is something that came up in the earlier panel, because, going way back to the origin story of the Partnership for the Bay's Future, there was an extensive listening tour that happened, and out of that listening tour came the tremendous capacity need, right? And if you go to local government and you say, what do you need? You're going to hear people. You don't have enough people. And if you go to our nonprofit partners who show up time and time again and advocate and put their time and resources and money, what do you need? And the answer would not be very surprising, grant dollars. Need flexible grant dollars and network convening and support. And so I just want to appreciate that that's how a lot of those features of the change-making work that we do came to be. And so, we understand, all of us in this room, I think, quite well, the dimensions and the scope and the sometimes seemingly intractable nature of the housing crisis. But because of this work and how much we have enabled innovation, we have unlocked creativity, we have brought new partners to the table, we have a lot of bright spots and some success stories to share. And so in addition to celebrating the achievements of the 5 years of the Partnership for the Bay's Future, I'd love to hear from folks around, what do you see as success? So kind of give us your blue sky vision. And then if you have any specific success stories from this work that you want to share, would love to hear about that.
I'll go first this time. Well, I'm going to say your project is the success story.
Yes. All right.
And Chris Iglesias, Unity Council, Abra's project is a success. And there are many projects are success stories. So they're not our success stories. That we could bring capital to them was the success story. I'll say within the Partnership for the Bay's Future, the success is how reactive we could be. So we built in a mechanism for an advisory group, but actually they're a governance group, to be able to change the products once a quarter. And so we have been through so much since 2019, pandemic. The interest rates for the for the Partnership for the Bay's Future Family Loan Funds were too high in the beginning. Now they're very desirable interest rates. CDCs have been facing so much. Astronomical changes in insurance, changes in the way that property management needs to happen, changes in the way that operations for buildings need to happen. So we were able to, every quarter, take input and say, what do we need to do to these products to change? What do we need to include? We included transitional housing. We included some forms of rehab. We were able to get the interest rate down in the earlier years. We were able to think more expansively about what does it mean to be we were able to change the AMI so we could test more things, to my earlier point. And so that was success. I would advise any other fund to do that, and I would advise everyone to think about it in their own context, like how can you continue to be flexible as the world changes around us. And I think from what I heard on the first panel, success for the future for us is everyone being in on creating this enabling environment. We need loans, we need grants, we need capacity building, we need general operating. We need all of that for our community-based organizations, but we have to keep bringing the resources. And so thank you to CZI for being the catalyst here. And can all philanthropy get on board? Thank you to all the governments that put money into try to keep many of these solutions going, and we have to keep doing that. CDFIs, we really have to look at how we can keep thinking about pushing ourselves and embracing the needs that we're hearing and thinking about risk a little bit differently so that these projects can get built. And so all of us have to push on the edges of where we are so we can get all the collective resources to the solutions.
Thank you for that. I would say we've had a few successes through this partnership. So the project that's being mentioned is how we were able to double our rental portfolio in purchasing a 17-unit property in Oakland through partnership with the City of Oakland and LISC. It was mentioned in the first panel, putting together dollars, that if without those dollars, the deal wouldn't have gone through. We came into that project as an emerging developer, a new developer who didn't technically have experience in managing a multi-unit, but we had a number of single-family, but through partnership, through relationship, with a willingness, we were successful, and this was during the pandemic. So that was one success. Having the opportunity to work on the policy side and with a fellow is us getting inside of municipality to teach us how to capitalize on that relationship, so as we go into other municipalities, kind of understanding the dynamic so that we would be successful in doing other work in other cities. So that was helpful. And then I think the indirect support was through the fellowship that I mentioned earlier with North Richmond, a project that we had been courting for almost 8 years. Wasn't until that fellowship that it actually became relevant and came to fruition. So we've been a factor on a number of different levels of this work. So very appreciative. Thank you.
I think the Learning Circle that was created by the fellows in the program, I think has been a real success. Based on what I was told, of course, every mayor likes to think, their city started something, but I have no idea what the truth is. So, when the pandemic first hit, we jumped out and pushed hard on a strategy of announcing an eviction moratorium, and we were the first city in the country to say, "Hey, we're gonna try to do this," and we knew it'd be legally fraught, certainly, and I think it was helpful that this leadership circle of fellows have been created, and Aysha, I mentioned before, was part of this, so that other cities could understand where the rocks and shoals were that we encountered, so they could also quickly get policies in place in March and April of 2020 as the pandemic was hitting. So I think that is a real success. Again, this regional collaborative thinking that can help good policies or imperative policies spread. The other thing I'd say is just, I think this coalition and the PBF has created has really embraced the innovation imperative. And I say the imperative because we all know there's not enough money. We're going to pass this bond, and there's still not going to be enough money. We can do everything right, and there's not going to be enough money. So now, of course, that doesn't mean we're not going to keep asking for more money, because that's what I do as a Democrat. But but the reality is, we've got to think about this differently. We've got to innovate constantly, and we can't be afraid of that innovation. And whether it's the loan fund or financial innovation or policy innovation or literally innovation in construction, which frankly we hadn't seen in this country in probably 6 or 7 decades until we started seeing factory-built housing, some other innovations coming along. You really need a coalition of leading thinkers and doers who are willing to say, yeah, we have to try this because we have no choice.
Yeah.
We can't just follow the same path at whatever, $950,000 a unit, and go back to our voters and say, as taxpayers, of course we expect you to pay more for the same thing. I'm very proud what has emerged through all that, and I hope that voters understand clearly how innovation is being embraced, and I hope that we can continue.
Thank you. And Sam, I love what you're saying, and also what I'm hearing from the rest of the panel about the relationship between innovation and risk. And I think where the Partnership for the Bay's Future has been especially helpful and influential is by stepping in and either shouldering some of the risk, which we've heard a lot about from the family of funds, of loan funds, and then also about enabling an environment where people feel safe to take risks, where sometimes policies will fail, sometimes coalitions won't make it. And if you can say that that's happened along the road to change, in some ways that shows that you're succeeding, right? Because you have stepped out onto that edge and taken risk, and that risk is what in turn enables bravery and innovation. So I just really want to appreciate and acknowledge that that is what the folks on this stage have brought and what every single person in this audience has brought to the work. And it also makes me really think about the relationship between innovation and work that happens at the local level. Because I really feel that we've been seeing some of the most innovative policies and advocacy and housing work come from our advocates who are really plugged into local realities, to their grassroots communities, and want to put to the panel, how do you see the relationship between the work that's unfolding at the local level and the work that's happening regionally at the state level, on a national stage even?
Well, I'll jump in since this is my opportunity to be the candidate. I promise I won't make this political. I know I'm not, again, the first mayor to say it's really frustrating dealing with the federal government. But we've got a lot of rigidity in sort of the federal approach to this crisis. And frankly, you go back to Washington and knock on doors in Capitol Hill, and there are a lot of members of Congress, and not just on the Republican side, who believe that homelessness is a local issue. And then you tell them, oh, by the way, we have 44 cities in this country that have at least 1,000 unhoused residents. And by the way, most of them aren't in California. And by the way, every mayor of any large metro is going to tell you they have a housing crisis. And just to try to trigger some kind of a reaction in Washington that, hey, this is actually something that we need DC to be leaning in on with us. I know certainly there are folks at HUD who might get that, but more broadly throughout the government, that actually this homelessness crisis, housing crisis is a national problem, deserves a federal response, and that means federal policy actually has to change. And certainly we saw some very positive developments through the pandemic and a whole lot more vouchers. Wouldn't we love to see those vouchers made permanent? So certainly we'd all love to see more resources, but also just some basic changes in policy, for example, making those vouchers more flexible to enable local communities to be able to be nimble in how we deploy them to get people off the street and be able to build in different ways. So much more could be accomplished if we had that federal partner willing to be that nimble. And so I think it's so important that we see what we're seeing here with Partnership for Bay Future and seeing others take notice of that and hopefully embracing it and getting others on board to push the federal government.
I would say for me, it's been refreshing in a lot of places that I sit to have access to state legislation, to federal representation, to share local stories and the needs. But I think what's going to be most critical is what we do with this regional bond, to be able to show our local influence with state government, because from what I've heard and what I've seen late last year, a lot of us as practitioners were making some safe assumptions. Oh, when this money comes, and it's become a part of an income line on a lot of projects. I'm like, yeah, I don't think you understand. This is a big lift. So I think the influence to really validate our influence on local level is how we're able to move this bond on a state level. I think that's going to be critical. I think that the influence we have on a local level is to stay a part of the conversations, because there's so many layers of policy that they oftentimes don't understand the intended consequences, or they haven't thought through the implementation. Mm-hmm. So we get really excited about getting the policy passed, but no one thought about, okay, so how do we enforce it? How will it work? And how will it impact what was the original consideration? So I think oftentimes the local perspective is underutilized or not paid attention to, and it tends to be when it's reactionary. We need something fast. We, pull together and we organize. But if we can find a way to stay consistent in these conversations so that all the efforts of getting things passed can actually do the work that it was designed to do.
For us at LISC, we're going to take a lot from this local and regional work into the future. So we saw that there's a real need for financing for affordable housing on publicly owned land. So once again, thank you to our friends at CZI. We have developed a product to help finance projects that are on publicly owned land. So another advertisement for any developers out there doing that work. Please come see us. We saw that preservation had this really important racial equity result from it. And so we are all in on preservation, building a preservation ecosystem. We have been awarded the opportunity to deploy some state money in preservation. The state does have a deficit right now, so we're working hard to make sure that that money continues to be available, but would be thrilled to do that work. And we're doing it in partnership with 6 other CDFIs. So being collaborative at the CDFI level, I think, is really important for statewide work. I think that's how we're going to get to scale that still holds this ability to be locally responsive. And then I would say, taking the work to the national scale, what we're hearing at LISC is that there's a lot of interest in shared ownership. There's a lot of interest in community land trusts. It's, again, about who controls the real estate, controls the neighborhood. And so the Bay Area team will be working closely with the national team to figure out what we can do in that space.
Thank you. Well, we're getting close to our time for Q&A, but I did just want to open up some space for some short responses around, do you have a call to action? For folks in this room or, folks who are outside of it, what would you kind of like to leave folks to take away with in terms of something that they can do or participate in?
I would say for those that have the power and the influence, be okay to relieve yourself of it, to give others the opportunity to see the work get done. For us that have been leading this fight through a number of different challenges, one being COVID and the social unrest and George Floyd's murder, being mindful of these leaders, that we're tired. Many of us are not well, and some of us are dying. So if you are in position to provide that respite, that support, not technical assistance, but capacity, and see us and support us, because that window is closing. The opportunities that were very pertinent 3 years ago is not happening now. So these organizations that have really held the work through this time, they're going to need additional support to be able to stay sustainable, so that we can see the future of everything that we've planted the seeds to grow.
Thank you, Nikki. I'll make my call to action a call for resources. So go advocate for that bond. 2024, November, $10 to $20 billion for affordable housing in the Bay Area. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity. But also, everywhere where we work, everywhere where we touch, there are opportunities for resources. And so this is a solution that, there's a set of solutions here that can be furthered with resources. And we just have to have the political will to say we can bring those.
Thank you. Sam, you have a call to action you'd like to leave folks with?
Okay. Well, I've been out on a campaign trail, and what I've noticed is the intense interest of a wide variety of people in solutions to this crisis. And by wide variety, I mean people aren't necessarily directly impacted by the housing crisis who are saying, this is actually a problem. This is a rare opportunity for us in this crisis to bring a lot of people in. And I think the call to action is actually to reach out beyond our normal circles, to start to bring folks in who may not share ideology or party or anything else, who actually may earnestly see this is a moment when we can work together, and God forbid that we work together in this country. So I'm hoping that we can all think about ways in which we can expand the tent to help us drive toward the solutions we know we need.
Thank you. And I also just want to put in a plug for the future piece of the Partnership for the Bay's Future, because in doing the policy work and seeing all of our teams really do that hard slog of changing hearts and minds, it just seems so clear and apparent now that we have to be able to describe the future that we want to see and not just the present problems that we're mired in. And we have to help people see themselves as being a part of the solution and to want to participate in that better and brighter future. Because we can't legislate what we can't imagine. And I see so much amazing work expanding the imagination of what can be possible and what the future can hold. And so I really want to encourage that expanding of imagination, because as that goes, policy follows. And so I think right on the dot, we are going to turn it over to the audience. Folks, I'm sure you have some questions for our amazing panelists. I think we'll have mics available for anyone who wants to ask questions. And I'm going to put in a gentle reminder to please ask a question and not make a statement. And keep it short and sweet, because we want to hear from folks. Also, shout out to the fellows who are also working this event. Thank you all.
Greg over here in the house. My name's Kim Pipkin. I'm the Executive Director for Black Developers Forum. Thank you, Cindy, for your
thank you,
generosity. Thank you to SF Foundation, too. I did want to make a statement because I can't help myself. So
You got the mic.
I do, that's right. So I'm from Leafy Marin County, and unfortunately I don't see anybody here from the county, which is really kind of a bummer. If you are here, please raise your hand. But what I wanted to say was, in response to Nikki, so I really want to talk about the future, because my organization has a handful of OGs, but the majority of the people who really want to be a part of development, whether it's commercial, community, or housing, there's not an abundance of them in the room. And I'd like to understand and pose a question, which is, how are you as leaders going to bring those people into the fold to help solve these problems? So that's my question, Greg.
Thank you.
Well, I think you might have set me up for that one, Kim. So as I mentioned earlier, through my experience of learning how to do development when we embarked on our Oakland project, we created our Emerging Developers Program that was established in 2021. It's like, I don't want you all to have to go through what I went through. So we have a 2.5-month-long program. We are currently in our 5th cohort. We have 80 alumni. And you have, to Kim's point, some young, assertive people of color, and I am specific to Black, BIPOC participants who are eager to get into the field. And so what we've been able to do is through our networking and influence, making connections, providing opportunities for them to meet and greet, and bringing the OGs into the room so that they can understand what it is to be a developer. Because what I've found is that most people thrive when they have access and that they have exposure. And that's really what our program is designed to do. So our goal is to do a minimum of 2 cohorts a year and continue to provide opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have. And I have to say, it really was on the tail of LISC's program, which I really do believe was really the first program that took on the task of working with small faith-based developers where there was no space before. And so we just kind of built off of what I learned being a part of that and continue to, and hoping to see it thrive.
Maybe I'll pick up from there. Thank you. We have 2 programs that I think could be helpful, and there needs to be more. But one is the Faith and Housing Program. Carla, Sharon, see you in the audience. So we have a cohort of 10 at a time, although we're making some adjustments to the program. Faith-based landowners come and learn all this lingo, right? All the kind of gatekeeping that happens in development, and break it down The idea in this program is that you would joint venture at the end of the program if you probably don't want to become a developer, but that you have the tools then to find an equitable partnership, a partnership that serves your needs, a partnership where you feel empowered to name the outcomes you really want to see. And then I'll talk about Housing Development Training Institute, which is our longtime program. Have trained 500 people across the state in partnership with LISC LA, LISC San Diego, and LISC Rural. And this is a program for folks that are maybe 2 to 3 years into their affordable housing development journey. It is right now a LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit focused program. I would love to build a program that's about non-LIHTC models and just really rigorous at 3 weeks total over the course of a year, taking a project through the program and then doing a simulation at the end. And from what I hear from everyone, it is the best program anyone's ever done, and you keep in touch with your program cohort for the rest of your career. I'm insanely jealous that I never did it.
That's great.
Great. See another question. Also, I love having the lights up because virtually everyone in the audience is a familiar face. It's
Yeah.
really nice to see.
Hi, friends. Heather Hood here from Enterprise.
Speaking of which,
I have a question for Nikki. I always love what you have to share, and you said some really beautiful nuggets tonight or today already. I wanted to know how have you pushed through all those headwinds when you first went to Richmond Neighborhood Housing Services? The world was not set up to do what you wanted to do. It still isn't. But it really wasn't then. And you've had cities that have been pains for various reasons. You've had folks who wanted to partner and kind of put your organization as the underdog. You've had all kinds of things. So I want to know, for those especially in the room who are starting something new and the world's not set up the way you want it to be set up, how have you dealt with that and kept hope and continued on?
Thank you for that question, because you're absolutely right. When I first started, I was the only one talking about ownership. Everyone was talking about hundreds of units, and I was the only one. It's the people. It's the people. Because it is hard. But when you see the people resonating with what you're attempting to do, and they say thank you, that's what makes it easy. And I think age and maturity, I don't know if I would have been as successful if I was younger, but being very comfortable with who I am, and very passionate about what I believe, that's made it easier, because I'm not always a popular opinion, but I'm committed to know that I'm speaking truth, not just for myself, but the people that I serve. So that's what makes it easier. And it's really anchored on the people.
Thank you, Nikki.
thank you. Any other questions?
Hello, everybody. My name is Adrienne Heert. I'm the co-founder of San Francisco CASA, the Child Advocate Program. We started something in 1991. My first site visit was with the San Francisco Foundation. The man came in and said, "You need to double your time and have your goal." We are now, I'm not involved anymore except as a donor, serving the number of children that we said in 1991 we'd be serving. So when you all were talking about not knowing what you were doing and just getting started, I went, oh, I know that story. Right. Someone invited me to this. I'm very glad that they did. I'm looking at some money that I have collected I was working with Northern California Community Loan Fund, and then they went off to become Community Visions. And I have a small pot of money, and I don't want to give it to Chase to put in and get 5%. But I also don't want to give it away. I've been talking to people about this idea for many, many years, and I always feel like they pat me on the head and say, just give it to a nonprofit, honey, because you really don't know what you're doing, honey. I've heard that before. So what I'm looking for is to better understand, is it LISC? Is it something else that says, you know, it's not a tremendous amount of money. It's like $100,000, which a lot of people would consider a lot. But right now in my life, it's okay for me to loan that. But I haven't been able to get anybody to talk to me about what I should be doing about that.
Carla has an answer.
Not on the panel, but it's so interesting because I think here in Berkeley, you all know this weekend is the Bioneers Conference that's bringing indigenous folks together, impact investors, philanthropy, and individuals. And so we run a little beautiful organization based in Oakland called Movement Strategy Center. And we've literally created a donor-advised fund product that is not traditional at all, that literally has social market options for donors who don't just want to stick their money into the stock market. We've created with financial advisors, literally community alternative investment portfolios where you could invest, and that little, what you think is little but is gigantic, can actually be crafted into grants, recoverable grants, loans, even the first capital loan loss in funds. And so I know you and I just bumped into each other in the ladies' room. But your partnership, your question is beautiful because that's what this is all about. What are the innovative things that are happening at the grassroots? And when we design that program from the feedback, the input from folks at the grassroots, some that are doing housing, some that are doing urban farms throughout California and elsewhere, some that's doing alliances and coalition building. So I don't want to take away from this, but I just want to applaud you because your question is spot on. It truly is. Just like I love Cindy, and I'm so glad that they're going to press the envelope to provide supports for community land trusts and a variety of cooperative and shared housing. It's that kind of innovative thinking. So anyway, thank you, and I'm more than happy to share with you.
All right.
Thank you. That is so beautiful because, I mean, that just captures the magic of these convenings and why it's so great to bring folks into the same room together. Because something like this happens every time we bring you all into the room where we realize that all we're doing is setting the table. And it's the magic and the expertise that everyone brings that then makes the space come to life. So thank you for that real life example. I don't know that anyone on the panel has anything they want to add to that, but if you do, feel free.
Good idea for politicians to keep their mouth shut sometimes in moments like this.
And I think we have time for another question.
We have one and then two over there.
Hi there, Jordan Grimes with Greenbelt Alliance. So my question is for Sam, and is really around regionalism. And I first love the CASA Compact shout out as one of the things that initially got me into as a housing nerd that got me into policy. But I'm really curious to hear how regionalism has, and the idea and embrace of regionalism has changed in the time since you became mayor many years ago in San Jose, and now running as a congressperson. What that sort of journey has been like, and it often feels, I think, that we are still at a place where too many of our elected leaders don't understand that we are all in this together, as a region, and really what we can do, I think, as a broader community to push that understanding that the housing crisis does not care about these man-made borders that we have, and will only be solved from this, from regional action. Curious to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. I came into office in 2015. I was blessed to have some great colleagues in San Francisco and Oakland, Libby Schaaf and Lee, and then London thereafter, who all really embraced the idea that the three large cities in the region really needed to be working together around core issues. And typically it was always around housing or transit, because those were just inevitably regional issues. And for several years, we just felt like the slog was that, three cities would be working really hard. And then maybe, okay, a couple others, Berkeley, Mountain View. But for the most part, it was three big cities that were trying to build housing, and we'd be in a region with 101 jurisdictions, and realizing we weren't going to actually solve this problem with a small number of us, even if we were the large cities. And I think it was really, the CASA process, then obviously work that CZI was doing very early on, and many other folks in this room, that started to broaden our perspective that regional meant more than just the big cities. And I think we are seeing some positive innovation in some of the smaller communities, but obviously we got a long way to go still. My hope is, and really it's going to really require a lot of education of our residents throughout the Bay Area to recognize we all have a stake in this. Because I can tell you, as I'm knocking on doors now, I don't think folks see the world the same way, literally on the opposite sides of the city limits from one another. And I think that's our work ahead if we're really going to tackle this thing, because it can't just be a half dozen cities and towns.
Hi, my name is Malik. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment around, I love what you all are doing. I work for CSH, and I do some of the national federal housing work. But the idea and the concept of collaboration is amazing. And I've worked all across the United States, and I have never seen this before. So just shout out to all of you all who are doing this type of work. And then also the idea of co-designing with the folks who are most impacted by the work is also amazing too. And Mr. Licardo, I had the opportunity of working with your CLC for the past 2 years around the YHDP project. And the idea of cross-sector partnership, your community, amazing. And I have never seen that all the years that I've been working in communities, reaching across the aisle to the most difficult type of folks to kind of work with, because the Bay Area is a little bit messy. We don't always like to partner with each other. But the change that came from your department, reaching across the aisles, reaching across different sectors, and the amount of work that they were doing around youth homelessness in your community, in your county, amazing. So just hats off to you all, folks. People out in the audience, that co-design with folks, that collaboration with your neighbors takes you a long, long way. But hats off to Santa Clara County.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fabulous. Well, I think we have time for one more question if folks want to do kind of a lightning round. Because I did not ask for the final question to be a shout out, but it feels very wonderful and appropriate to appreciate the incredible work that these leaders on stage are holding, the incredible work that every single person in this audience is holding. Housing is really a movement whose time has come. And we could not be prouder at the Partnership for the Bay's Future than to be doing it hand in hand with all of you. So I want to ask you all to join me in giving our panel a round of applause, and to you all as well.